एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज के वीडियो में भी हम 3 क्वेश्चंस डिस्कस करेंगे प्रोलॉग टू द कैंटरबरी टेल्स से रिलेटेड। और पहले के सारे वीडियोस के लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन में। चलिए आज के वीडियो स्टार्ट करते हैं। चलिए डिस्कस करते हैं आज का पहला क्वेश्चन। क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन द comment the characters of Chaucer's pilgrims are the characters which compose all ages and nations. Or are we justified in saying that the characters in Chaucer's prologue to the Canterbury Tales are for all ages and for all lands? It was William Blake who emphasized the universality of the characters delineated by Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales. Blake said, "The characters of Chaucer's pilgrim are the characters which compose all ages and nations. As one age falls, another rises, different to mortal sides, but to immortals only the same. For we see the same characters repeated again and again in animals, vegetables, minerals, and in men. Nothing new occurs in identical existence. Accident ever varies. Substance can never suffer change nor decay." Dryden too had previously referred to the universality of Chaucer's pilgrims. Dryden had written, "We have our forefathers and great grandames all before us as they were in Chaucer's days. Their general characters are still remaining in mankind, and even in England, though they are called by other names than those of monks and friars and canons and nuns, for mankind is ever the same, and nothing lost out of nature, though everything is altered." Of course, both Dryden and Blake have expressed these opinions in relation to the totality of Chaucer's characterization of the pilgrims in the whole of the work called the Canterbury Tales, but these opinions are largely true of the prologue also. It cannot, of course, be claimed that each portrait in the prologue is wholly universal. Each person has certain individual characteristics which other of his types are not likely to possess. Each has his or her individual physiognomy, for instance, and each wears his or her distinctive clothes. The monk's sleeves are lined with grey fur of the finest quality, and he wears supple boots. He is fat and is very good shape. Like his horse, the clerk of Oxford is hollow-cheeked and lean, and wears a threadbare cloak. The cook has an ulcer on his shin. The wife of Bath wears red stockings and has large hips. The miller is a stout fellow with powerful muscles and large bones. In short, each character has something individual to mark him off other members of his group and his class. But most of the characters have something universal about them, and the universal elements in these characters are to be found in all ages and all lands. To this extent, therefore, the comment quoted in this question is justified. Of course, Chaucer says, Blake, some of the names of or titles are altered by time, but the characters themselves forever remain unaltered, and consequently they are the physiognomies or lineaments of universal human life, beyond which nature never steps. Names alter, things never alter. Chaucer continues, Blake has varied the heads and forms of his personages into all nature's varieties. Chaucer begins his delineation of characters with the knight. The knight is a true hero, a good, great, and wise man. He has spent his life in the field and has ever been a conqueror. He is that species of characters which is very age stands as the guardian of man against oppressor. He is therefore universal in this respect. Every age has its champions of worthy causes, and the knight is a symbol of these champions. His son, the squire, is like him. He has in him germ of perhaps greater perfection. Still, as he combines literature and the art with his warlike studies, the yeoman is almost perfect in his profession, and persons of his kind are also found in every period of history and in every clime. The prioress has a few little delicate affections. She has pretensions to aristocratic behavior. She has learned French and she copies the manners of the upper classes. She becomes sentimental over her pet dogs, whom she feeds with roasted meat or milk and bread. She is very particular about her appearance. All these vanities of the prioress are to be met within thousands of middle class women who are forever copying the elegant style of living of the aristocracy. The universality of the portrayal of the prioress is thus obvious. The only incongruity here, however, is that the prioress, being a member of a religious organization, is not expected to indulge in these worldly fashions. The monk has been described as rich, eloquent, amorous, and witty. He is young and handsome, but he is a complete rogue with constitutional gaiety enough to make him a master of all the pleasures of the world. However, one cannot agree with Blake's estimate that the monk was not intended as a burlesque character. Chaucer has employed the same irony in portraying the monk which he employs in the case of Tyrus. He is a most worldly kind of monk. The friar sells absolution. He wins women's favor by giving them ornamental knives and pens he associates only with the rich and keeps away from the poor. Two of other ecclesiastical figures, namely the summoner and the pardoner, are wholly villainous in their activities. The summoner teaches people not to feel afraid of the archdeacon's curse, that is excommunication, because money can settle all spiritual problems and he can take advantage of a girl. The pardoner carries a bag full of fake pardons and bogus relics. He befools the people and makes more money in one than the parish priest makes in 2 months. His sincerity is feigned, and his tricks show a complete want of scruple in him. The hypocrisy, the greed, the frauds practiced by these persons are even today to be found in almost every country and every religion. Every period of history and every territory has had and still has its religious impostors and pretenders who lay traps for the credulous people, whose number is legion. Every other day, we read in the daily newspaper accounts of how bogus sadhus and fakirs dupe the people in order to make money. The number of genuine men of religion is so small as to be negligible. An overwhelming majority of those who describe themselves as men of religion and who go about preaching the tenets of the religion to which they profess to belong bear a family resemblance to the monk, the friar, the summoner, and the pardoner portrayed by Chaucer in the prologue. Blake describes the pardoner as the knave of that period and says, "This man is sent in every age for a rod and scourge and for a blight, for a trial of men, to divide the classes of men." His champion, the summoner, is also a devil of the first magnitude. Chaucer's lawyer is also an eternal figure. Let us but think of any lawyer of any of our acquaintance, and we shall have no to confess that he corresponds in the main to the portrait of the character's sergeant at law. We have only to visit the office of any lawyer to find him pretending to be exceedingly busy, busier than he really is. And who can deny that our doctors of medicines are often in league with the manufacturers of spurious drugs, and that they all possess an extraordinary love of gold? Chaucer's doctors of medicine is not unique in maintaining a friendship. The apothecaries and in making money during an epidemic. In other words, the cunning of Chaucer's lawyer and the dishonesty and greed of Chaucer's doctor of medicine are universal characteristics to be found in those professions all over the world. The legal ability of Chaucer's lawyer coexists with his cunning, and his doctor of medicine is conversant with the theories and discoveries of all the great medical experts. Even though he is a mercenary, this coexistence of professional ability and expertness with the love of pelf and the capacity for fraud to acquire wealth is a common phenomenon. It is not clear, however, why Blake gives unadulterated praise to both the lawyer and the doctor, ignoring the irony behind their portraits. Says Blake, Chaucer's lawyer is a character of great venerableness, a judge, a real master of the jurisprudence of his age. The doctor of psych is described as the first of his profession, perfect, learned, completely master and doctor in his art. The Franklin is a man of Epicurean taste, and he is at the same time extraordinarily hospitable. The Franklin, too, is not a unique character. We know of many men of means whose principal pleasure in life is eating and drinking, and who take great pains to keep themselves supplied with all kinds of exquisite foods. The combination of such Epicurean taste with a desire to have the reputation of being a good host is quite natural. The Franklin too therefore represents a universal type of humanity. The universal characteristics of the wife of Bath are obvious. She represents not the virtuous or pious class of womanhood, but the class of women who, having an amorous nature, care little for chastity, who are often found of merry-making and fun, and who enjoy gossip. The wives of the guildsmen possess the universal trait of vanity. They wish to be given a measure of respect which they think is their due. These wives want to be addressed as madam, and they wanted to lead a ceremonial procession. This desire for social recognition and for precedence is common to most women. The parson represents goodness, and he too has a universal quality. Blake called him an apostle, a real messenger of heaven, sent in every age for its light and its warmth. This man is beloved and venerated by all and neglected by all. He serves all and is served by none. The plowman is a personification of simplicity. He lives a life of peace, charity, and contentment. He loves man next only to God. Such men are rare, but they do exist. The plowman is thus a universal figure also, in the sense that all ages and lands can boast of such persons, though their names is exceedingly small. Nor can we ignore the host, such jovial men, having a wide acquaintance with a vast range of human beings and human affairs, having also the capacity to assume leadership of their fellows, are to be found in plenty everywhere. चलिए हम नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन डिस्कस करते हैं. राइट अ नोट ऑन चॉसर्स ह्यूमर और शो हाउ Chaucer's humor is closely related to his tolerant view of human shortcomings, or explain and illustrate the remark that Chaucer's whole point of views is that of a humorist, or bring out the humorous elements in the prologue, or the terms satire, irony, humor are frequently employed by critics when writing of Chaucer's poetry. Justify the use of any of or all of them with reference to the prologue. Or Chaucer's humor is of a description the most thoroughly delightful discuss. A humorist is one who is quick to perceive the funny side of things and who has the capacity to laugh and to make others laugh at what is absurd or ridiculous and what is incongruous. Chaucer is one of the greatest humorists in English literature, and the humor appears abundantly in the Canterbury Tales, including the prologue. The use of the term humor by critics in relation to Chaucer is therefore fully justified. The prologue offers plentiful illustrations of Chaucer's sense of humor. His characterization of almost all the characters here, barring those of the knight, the yeoman, the parson, and the plowman, is indeed humorous. It has at the same time to be pointed out of pure humor also in the prologue. For example, we laugh at the squire's love insomnia, the leanness of the clerk at Oxenford, and of his horse, which is his characterization of almost all the characters here, barring those of Knight, the yeoman, the parson, and the plowman, is indeed humorous. It has at the same time to be pointed out that Chaucer's humor is most ironical and satirical. We do have examples of pure humor also in the prologue. For example, we laugh at the squire's love insomnia, the leanness of the clerk of Exenford, and of his horse, which is compared to a rake, and Chaucer's false modesty. When he says that his wit is short, the motive behind this kind of humor is laughter for its own sake. But irony and satire are much more conspicuous in Chaucer's treatment of characters. Satire has generally a corrective motive. Irony is one of the chief weapons of satire. Chaucer, as an ironist and satire, is not out of to reform people, but he surely finds amusement in the absurdities, affections, and some of the minor vices of the people he deals with. The chief point to note about his use of irony and satire in order to amuse us and make us laugh is that his approach to human nature is neither malicious nor cynical, with the result that his satire is always mild and gentle and does not take the form of denunciation or abuse. He does not, like Swift, feel enraged or infuriated by the weaknesses and shortcomings of human beings, because his attitude towards them is not only tolerant but indulgent. For this reason, his humor is thoroughly delightful. being free from the taint of ill will, cynicism, and pessimism. His comic faculty finds full play when he surveys human beings. He is not fired by the zeal of a social reformer or a religious missionary. His whole point of view in dealing with human life and human beings is that of a humorist. And that is a person who feels amused rather than annoyed or upset by the oddities, angularities, contradictions, and venial sins of human beings. Chaucer's use of irony to build up a satirical portrait and to make us laugh is clearly seen as in his presentation of the prioress. The prioress speaks French fluently, according to the school of Stratford at Bow, though not according to the Persian mode. So this is an ironical reference to the prioress' aristocratic breeding. Her dress and her fashionable manner are also ironically described. Her charitable nature too is depicted in such a way as to amuse her. Her spirit of charity is seen chiefly in her feeding her pet dogs with expensive foods, a clearly ironical fling. The ironic implication throughout the portrait of the prioress is that, in spite of her holy calling, she is more concerned with worldly things than with the spirit. At the same time, Chaucer makes the prioress quite amiable by emphasizing her essential femininity. The portrait of the prioress is thus a prominent example of Chaucer's tolerant view of human failings and amusing and also delightful manner in which he reveals them to us. The monk too is portrayed satirically. Is fond of hunting. He keeps a large number of fine horses in his stable. When he rides, the jingling of the bells on the bridle of his horse is heard at a distance. He finds the rules of monastic discipline to be old and therefore out of date. He does not wish to drive himself mad by studying too much and so on. The worldliness of this monk is clearly exposed by ironic means, and the whole portrait is round off when the reference to his particularity for a roast fat swan. Even at the prioress portrait was rounded off with an ironical reference to the inscription "Love conquers all" on her brooch. Irony is employed in the portrait of Friar too. Here are the most ironical lines in the portrait. Onto his honor, he was a noble post. He was a noble pillar of his order, and there has no man nowhere so virtuous. There was no man anywhere so virtuous. We really feel amused to read such lines about a man whose whole approach to his profession is mercenary. We have some of Chaucer's most acid irony when he describes the friar as telling the sinner that they have merely to give money to men like him in order to obtain divine forgiveness. Ironical humor occurs in the portrait of merchant when Chaucer tells us that the merchant was so dignified in his dealings and his bargainings that no one could judge that the merchant was in debt. The lawyer amuses us by pretending to be busier than he is. The lawyer's fraudulent transactions are not made by Chaucer an object of any vehement criticism. These are simply at in order to amuse us by pointing out the incongruity between his vast legal ability and his essential dishonesty and cunning. But Chaucer does not castigate the lawyer. Chaucer's spirit of toleration and indulgence is clearly seen here. The portrait of the Franklin is again satirical, but this time the satire is the mildest possible because it is directed against what is a perfectly excusable weakness. The Franklin is ironically described as Epicurus' own son and the Saint Julian of his country. Well, I loved he by the wharf, a sop in wine to leaven until it was everywhere his own. For he was Epicurus' own son, Saint Julian he was in his core country. Woe to the Franklin's cook if his sauces were not pungent and sharp, and if the dinner table was not ever ready for the guest. The laughter here results from the Franklins attaching excessively importance to food. While other people eat to live, he lives to eat, and incidentally too makes his guests eat also. Chaucer gives much praise to his doctor of medicine for his medical knowledge, but there is an element of satire in this portrait also. The understanding between this doctor and a chemist is ironically conveyed to us in the following lines. Full ready had he his apothecaries to send him drugs, and his literaries, for each of them made other for to win his friendship, Nesnet knew to begin. The author also tells us, ironically, that the doctor had kept what he earned during the plague and that he especially loved coal, which is a cordial in medicine. The miller's dishonesty is ironically conveyed by the line, and yet he had a tomb of gold pardy, and yet he had a thumb of gold by God. Apart from this one satirical fling, this portrait is an example of pure fun. The miller is large of muscle and also of bones. At wrestling, he always wins the prize. He has one of the tip of his nose award with a tuft of hair on it. His nostrils are black and large, and his mouth is as big as a large furnace. This physical description is quite amusing, but the most amusing line in this description is the one which tells us that he couldn't have any door off its hinges by running at it with his head. The most ironical and the most amusing line in the portrait of the reeve are those in which we are informed that the reeve knew subtle way of pleasing his employer. For instance, he gave or lent to this employer the employer's own goods and received not only the employer's thanks but also a coat and a hood as a reward for the service. While this is a grip at the reeve's dishonesty, we are also amused by Chaucer's reference to the reeve's long and lean legs, which are compared to sticks with no calf visible. There is much good humor, the fun in this portrait without the least touch of malice or even irritation on Chaucer's part. In spite of the satirical purpose, no reformist zeal is to be found here. The two portraits of the summoner and the partner are masterpieces of satire. In both of these portraits, the irony is quite harsh. Chaucer's spirit of toleration here, as we feel, strained to the utmost because the faults of these two men are not of a minor nature, but both men being complete rogues. The very face of the summoner is revolting. It was frightening to the children. The summoner's love of garlic, onions, and strong drink are indicative of his coarse taste. He could even pull a Finch that to seduce a girl if he got the opportunity. He thinks little of the Archdeacon's curse because he tells the sinner that money can settle all such problems. He wears a garland as large as a nail house sign and a round loaf of bread as his buckler. But even here, Chaucer adds redeeming features. For instance, he tells us that the summoner was a gentle rascal and a kind one, and that a better companion could not be found. The satire in this portrait is pungent, but even here Chaucer is inclined to forgive his victim. Chaucer lightens the satire by his reference to the summoner's garland, which was as large as an alehouse sign, and the round loaf of bread which served as the summoner's buckler. The practice of selling religious relics was a notorious abuse of the time, like the sale of indulgences or pardons. This pardoner is guilty of these malpractices. Chaucer goes on to make fun of him by saying that the pardoner was a noble ecclesiastical and that to win silver he sang merrily and loud in the church. Not as Chaucer spare him as regards his physical features, the pardoner thought that he wrote in the latest style, uh, with hair loose and without wearing a hood. He had a voice as tiny as a goat's, and he neither had a beard nor was likely to have one. His face being as smooth as if he had just been shaved. Thus, we find that humor, including irony and satire, is the most conspicuous ingredient in Chaucer's characterization of the pilgrims. In the prologue, this humor lends a most distinctive quality to his character sketches. Indeed, in this respect, also Chaucer may be regarded as a pioneer in English literature and may even be looked upon as the founder of comic fiction. चलिए आज के वीडियो का लास्ट क्वेश्चन डिस्कस करते हैं. डिस्कस Chaucer's prologue to the Canterbury Tale as a portrait gallery, or consider the prologue to the Canterbury Tale as a wonderful portrait gallery of pilgrims, or from your study of Chaucer's prologue to the Canterbury Tales justify the comment. It is sufficient to say, according to the proverb, that here is God plenty, or here is God plenty. How far is this remark applicable to the prologue to the Canterbury Tales? Going through the prologue to the Canterbury Tales is like visiting a portrait gallery. In a portrait gallery, we see portraits of a large number of persons on display. These portraits impress us with a variety of persons, a variety of poses and attitudes, and a variety of dresses, and they impress also with their vividness. Each portrait creates an impression that a real human being sits or stand before us. This precisely is the impression that the prologue produces on us. We are greatly struck by a large variety or diversity of characters here. Indeed, the wealth of portraiture in the prologue is remarkable. A large number of human beings who are both types and individuals have been delineated by Chaucer, and these human beings possess certain universal qualities also. At the same time, on these characters are by no means puppets. They are not wooden figures. On the contrary, they appear before us as living and believable characters. The vitality and the realistic quality of the various characters are undeniable. Their apparel too is in most cases described, and that lends additional realism to these portraits. There are first of all the knight, the square, and the yeoman, all are whom conform to certain known types of human beings in the 14th century, but all of whom also have certain distinctive features. The knight represents the code of behavior prevailing in those days among members of this class of society. As for his individual characteristics, he is depicted as modest like a maiden and wearing a doublet of coarse cloth. The square has distinguished himself in battles as he was expected to, but he can also compose songs and he can dance and draw and write well. The human is described as a true forester, but he also wears the medal of St. Christopher. From these characters who are associated with the medieval code of chivalry, we pass to the prioress, whom, however, we shall consider along with the wife of Bath. The next character is the hunting monk who, ignoring the rules of monastic discipline, neither labors with his hand nor pores over a book, and is the cloistered one who laughs a fat swan, the best of any roast. Such indeed were a large majority of the monks of the period. The monk is individualized too. He wears an intricate pin of wrought gold in the shape of a love knot. He is fat and has a bald head which shines like glass. His eyes are sharp and roll in his head. We do certainly get the feeling that we are standing face to face with this man. So vividly is he represented to us by Chaucer. The monk's sleeves are trimmed with the finest grey fur. The portrait of the friar is no less realistic or vivid. This friar misuses his authority to hear confessions, and he sells absolution. Like most friars of time, he carries ornamental knives and pins to be given to pretty women. He associates only with rich people, keeping the beggars and the lepers at arm's length. He is capable of extracting some money, however little, even from a destitute widow, and he settles disputes of a worldly nature on love days, obtaining substantial fees for his pains. The friar wears a half cape of double worsted. After a perusal of this description, we begin to feel that we have really met this man. Such is Chaucer's skill in characterization. Going through the character sketches of the lawyer and the doctor, we find it possible to identify him with certain professional men of our own acquaintance. We have all dealt with lawyers and doctors, and we find Chaucer's characterization of these two men to be most realistic and lifelike. This lawyer has enriched himself with fraudulent transactions in land, and he always tries to pretend to be busier than he really is. The doctor allows the apothecaries to send him some standard drugs and medicines so that both he and they can make profits out of sales. The doctor specially loves gold, and he has not missed the opportunity to make money during the pestilence. Indeed, these features of the lawyer and the doctor are universal and have been valid through the centuries. As for their clothes, the lawyer wears a motley coat belted with a girdle of silk with small stripes, while the doctor is clad in blood red and blue-grey lined with taffeta and fine silk. The miller, the manciple, and the reeve may be considered next. The miller is described as a man of robust physique, as a ribald joker, as stealing his customers' corn and overcharging them, as having a thumb of gold, as having a wart, or on the tip of nose and so on. He too is a mixture of typical and individual characteristics and perfectly convincing person. The Manciple is shrewd enough to be able to outwit 50 law students, while the Reeve goes on one step further in the direction of fraud. The Reeve is a very skillful manipulator of accounts, and no auditor can find fault with him. He gives in lends to the Lord and the Lord's own goods in such a way as to make the Lord believe that the reef has done him a favor. The reef has accumulated sufficient private wealth and has built himself a house in a fair part of the countryside. Physically, he offers a contrast to the miller, as his legs are very long and lean, while the miller is a stout fellow. We can easily visualize all these three characters, but the miller and the reeve are more vividly drawn than the manciple. The summoner and the partner are memorable figures. The treatment of the summoner begins with a visual description, but it is more to it than simple visualization. His physical disorders are described in such a way as to suggest inner or spiritual corruption. He has incurable pimples on his face. He is fond of garlic, onions, and strong wine. When drunk, he makes a show of his meager knowledge of Latin. For a quart of wine, he will allow a fellow to keep a mistress for 12 months. He teaches people not to stand in awe for Archdeacon's curse, because the curse can be rendered effectual by paying money. He knows the secrets of a young people of his district and so on. The summoner indeed vibrates with life and vitality. The partner is a fitting companion for him. They both join in singing a love song. The partner has thin hair and shining eyes like a hare's. He carries fake pardons and bogus relics in order to make money, but he is able to also to read out a passage from the Bible or the life story of a saint eloquently, thus creating an impression of pity in the church. He too is fully alive, but both the summoner and the partner represent certain well-known types of Middle Ages and clearly convey to us the abuses that were prevalent in the church in those days, but both of them have their individual characteristics to mark them off from others. The summoner has, besides the pimples, scabby black brows and a shaggy beard, while the partner has a voice, has a goats, and a face without a beard. There are women, too, among Chaucer's pilgrim. The wife of Bath is an unforgettable character. Like many other members of this band, she is both in type and an individual. She is skillful at clothing making. She is quite aggressive in claiming her right to go to the collection box before anybody else. She wears scarlet stockings and carries a heavy weight of kerchiefs on her head on a Sunday, but she is somewhat deaf. She has visited many shrines in the past. She has had lovers in her youth and has married 5 husbands. She is cap-toothed and has large hips, and she can laugh and joke in company, besides having complete knowledge of the remedies of love. It is true that the character of Wife of Bath is developed further later in the Canterbury tales, but even the brief sketch of her in the prologue conveys to us an impression of energetic, full-blooded, highly sociable, and self-assertive woman. The prioress is easily distinguished from her. In the case of the prioress, her femininity and womanly charm are emphasized more. The prioress has sweet features, knows aristocratic manners, is fashionable in her dress, gets sentimental over her pet dogs, and so on. But alive though she is a shadow beside the wife of Baal. The wives of the guildsmen are are merely mentioned in the prologue, but a universal trait of all women is indicated when we are told of these wives' desire to be socially recognized and respected because of their wealth. There's a merchant in this company who speaks mainly of the increase in his profits and is worried about the sea route being kept open to ensure the flow of trade on which business depends. He's in debt, but he takes care not to let his secret leak out. The Franklin is a recognizable type also. His chief interest in life is exquisite food and drink, and by virtue of this interest, he may be regarded as Epicurus's own son. He is very hospitable and may therefore be called the Saint Julian of his country. His bread and his ale are always uniformly good, and a man with a better wine cellar does not exist. Surely we have known such persons in the course of our lives. though their numbers have greatly dwindled and is further dwindling on account of inflation. Nor should we ignore the cook who has an ulcer on his chin, or shipman, the master of the Madeleine, who is certainly a good fellow, being well experienced in stealing his client's wine. The parson and the plowman represent, like the knight and the squire, some of the finest aspects of human nature. The parson is benign, patient, and helpful to his parishioners. He sets a noble example to his flock. He actually practices what he preaches. He is not in the least mercenary and does not hire out his benefice in order to become a chantry priest in London. Chaucer says about him, a better priest I troon than Novatius. The plowman, sketched in a much briefer compass, lives in special charity, in peace and charity, and loving God and then his neighbor exactly as himself. They are idealized portraits, but approximations to those idols too exist in this world. Thus, in the variety and range of Chaucer's characterization, amazing, the poet has selected characters from various classes of contemporary society and given them an eternal life. We are given the impression that we have actually met and known them. We get the feeling that we have called on them and talked to them. We carry both pleasant and unpleasant memories of them. The mention of any of them stirs certain responsive chords in us. Here is God's plenty indeed, and Chaucer makes us a marvelous portrait gallery without doubt. थैंक यू। आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको पसंद है। कैसी लगी हमें कमेंट करके बताएं, और अगर कोई डाउट्स और सजेशंस है तो वो भी आप कमेंट सेक्शन में ड्रॉप कर सकते हैं। और अगर आप ऐसी लॉन्ग फॉर्म में सीरीज चाहते हैं तो हमें कमेंट सेक्शन में बताएं। थैंक यू। अगर आज की वीडियो अच्छी लगी तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माई चैनल। मिलते हैं कल एक और इन्फॉर्मेटिव वीडियो के साथ शाम 4 बजे। टिल देन कीप वॉचिंग एंड कीप सपोर्टिंग द सोलफुल डायरी। थैंक यू।